Hello everyone, welcome to my full walkthrough of the A Matter of Family DLC for Batman Arkham Knight with no damage. And you might be thinking, why are you not doing no combo loss and no restrictions alongside the no damage restriction for this DLC? Well, it's purely because the A Matter of Family DLC is the longest piece of content for Batman Arkham Knight, and also I was getting a lot of moments where I lost my combo for pretty stupid reasons that had nothing to do with my own abilities. It was everything to do with the game. And to restart because of a very minor thing like that, and restarting the entire DLC almost gives the impression that that is just a major issue with the game. I was not willing to put up with that. Like, this DLC is fun, but I'm just going to ruin it if I choose to slot into a very pointless restriction like that. That just makes the amount of Family DLC a very tedious run, more so than an actual fun DLC. And this is not as good as the Red Hood DLC in my opinion, but I do like it more than the other DLCs. I mean, Seraphim17 hates this DLC because he says it's a cash grab, and he said that there are a lot of problems with the fundamental mechanics on Batgirl compared to what it was like in the main game. And he attributed to Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers was the one that developed this DLC. And also, he said that Batgirl was very slow, but I don't see why, though, because Batgirl feels way faster than Batman. The only thing that makes her worse than Batman is how limited she is with her capabilities. She doesn't have as many gadgets. She doesn't have a lot of abilities that Batman has, like, for instance, the Seek and Destroy technique or the multi-ground takedown. She has a very bare-bones combat system, I would say. Although not as bare bones as with Harley Quinn. She's miles better than Harley Quinn, that's for sure. And we're being introduced to some new mechanics here. So with the remote hacking device, you have the ability to distract enemies and therefore gain access to a series of takedown animations to thin the herd before they eventually catch on to what you're doing and you're forced to fight them. And there's also a mechanic where you can turn the lights off to give you an advantage against the enemies. These seem like interesting ideas, but the game never really presents a scenario where you need to use them, aside from the second Predator encounter. And the second Predator encounter, there's just one device I use with the remote hacking device, and it's that knockout gas. Every other device is pointless, because you can get rid of most of the enemies using silent takedowns, then you use that device, and then you get rid of the rest of them using silent takedowns. So, interesting how the game offers you these mechanics, yet never really makes you want to prioritize them or even want to experiment with them. Because relying upon your fundamentals leads to quicker progress than relying upon complex designs. And it's nothing new because Batman Arkham City, Batman Arkham Origins, and Batman Arkham Knight, these games definitely have mechanics that feel very unnecessary, and they don't exactly contribute that much to actual progress through a Predator or combat scenario. I mean, this is not the case with Batman Arkham Knight, I would say, but Batman Arkham Origins, like, remember the concussion detonator? Remember how useless that gadget was? Did anyone ever use it? And then with Batman Arkham Knight, the explosive gel. I know I just said the combat in Batman Arkham Knight has no forgettable mechanics, but the explosive gel is so trash in this game when you're using it in combat. And its only utility is in Predator encounters. And the two Predator encounters you do in this DLC are fun, but I find the first one to be way more fun because I found a way to use a ladder to my advantage to knock off all of the enemies and incapacitate them, and I do it for every single enemy aside from like one or two enemies. And speaking of which, we're heading over to this Predator encounter right now. So the first thing you'll want to do here is get rid of the snipers. You'll want to do silent takedowns so that you don't alert the snipers to your position. I equipped the line launcher just then, hoping I could just get over to that guy, but I don't recommend it, and it doesn't even work anyway. But once you've taken out the snipers, there are a couple more guys. There's 4 of them, actually. But 2 of them you can take out with silent takedowns, and then the last 2 enemies are together. So you need to use your Batarang to knock over one guy, and then use the inverted takedown as quickly as possible before the Batarang makes an impact on the guy. And then we get to another phase in this Predator encounter where at least 9 enemies, I believe, or maybe even more, are coming after you. And you're going to see me use the dive bomb technique and also the Batarang and explosive gel during that phase of the Predator encounter, and it just completely trivializes it. And I love it when you can do those kind of things in Predator encounters. Just find some way to make them very funny and very enjoyable, and you take a lot of pride in actually finding these strategies out of nowhere. And this is what you're going to be getting when you do this Predator encounter the way I'm doing it. But Serum 17, he brought up Batman Arkham City's DLC for a bit. I mean, he was only bringing it up because he said that the A Matter of Family DLC is no longer than the DLC from Batman Arkham City, and they are of very similar prices. I don't know what his thoughts were on Harley Quinn's Revenge from Batman Arkham City, but what I will say, though, is that compared to that DLC, this DLC is way better than Harley Quinn's Revenge. Harley Quinn's Revenge is just filled with so many contrived scenarios. It reuses assets from Batman Arkham City. It is so boring, and it is just not interesting to play as Robin compared to Batman. Robin is so inferior to Batman in terms of combat and Predator abilities, but Batgirl at least has some capabilities very similar to Batman, and these scenarios that they put you in are interesting, and then the music especially. The music for this DLC, because it's made by Warner Brothers, it means it's going to be awesome music, whereas normally in the Rocksteady games, the music is pretty tame and never really high octane, whereas with Batman Arkham Origins and this DLC, Warner Brothers knows how to really deliver high-octane emotions with their music, and it's done so wonderfully in this DLC, and I love hearing the music during combat encounters, and I love how suspenseful the music is, and it's just so surprising that this kind of DLC would get very suspenseful music for its combat music, but I love it. But this right here is the strategy for this Predator encounter, which I got on the first try. So the game will automatically make you grapple to that grapple point, and then you need to make sure you have your smoke pellets equipped before you finish the animation. The game will force you to look at the Ferris wheel, and then you need to look down and throw a smoke pellet exactly where I was so that you can stun the two enemies that climb the ladder. Sometimes it'll just be one, other times you won't get any enemies, but you just need to get it where you wait a little bit after eliminating those enemies for the enemies to just go on their normal patrol routes. So when they're not trying to climb up the ladder, you go back onto that grapple point and then glide off of it, do the dive bomb on this platform, and this will cause the enemies to climb the ladders. And also make sure that you place explosive gel. The explosive gel serves as a safeguard just in case enemies decide to come from above. So you just blow up the explosive gel when they actually climb down the ladder. And it also helps ensure that when you're busy dealing with enemies that are climbing the ladders, you won't get into a scenario where you have one guy coming down the ladder and then you have one guy climbing up the ladder, so it's hard to prioritize the enemies. That right there will allow you to do this Predator encounter very effectively, and that's when these Predator encounters get so much fun, when you find this really cheesy exploit and you're just able to capitalize on it. And I take so much pride in finding that strategy. It is awesome. But once you've done that Predator encounter and you've gotten the hostages off of the Ferris wheel, we now have to disable this bomb, and you're on a timer. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to use the critical beatdown system. It's a good thing as well that Batgirl has the critical beatdown system, yet Harley Quinn and Catwoman don't have the critical beatdown system. And I'm guessing the reason why a lot of the new mechanics for Batman Arkham Knight aren't a part of those characters is because those characters are technically villains, if you want to count Catwoman as a villain, of course, but she's more so an anti-hero, basically. But they just want to make sure that the villains don't have the same kind of capabilities as Batman, because if they had the same kind of capabilities as Batman, maybe they wouldn't be losing as much to him. And why did I lose my combo just then? I did the aerial attack on him because I was using a Batarang on that one guy who was using that propane tank, and I should have had the option to do the ground finish against the guy I did the aerial attack on, but no, he didn't do it. And it was just really stupid issues like that that made me not want to do this whole restriction of trying to get no combo loss, because this DLC is way too long. Way too long is a good thing, though, because at least this DLC has content compared to the other pieces of DLC. I mean, I still find the Red Hood DLC to be a lot more enjoyable, but I still find this DLC to be a lot of fun. And I mentioned that Serum 17 doesn't like this DLC, and he said that he read a lot of articles about this DLC where people were saying that it was going to be a very ambitious piece of content. And you were going to a different area, you'd be dealing with multiple supervillains, there'd be like multiple side quests and the like, and the people who did those articles confuse the information because there's only two supervillains you're encountering. It's just Joker and Harley, but you're encountering them in the exact same fight. And then there's only one side mission in this DLC where you actually learn about the man who made this establishment and that he was doing it for his daughter. And it actually links greatly to Batman Arkham Asylum because this actually details the origins of the Titan formula. Like this guy who made the Ferris wheel attraction and the rest of this amusement park, he actually tried to give his dying daughter Titan, but the Titan unfortunately killed her, and so therefore this establishment closed. And that is pretty interesting that they tried to link this game to Arkham Asylum. And I've criticized those DLCs that take place after the events of Batman Arkham Knight as never really tying to the main story of Batman Arkham Knight. But for this DLC to actually have some relevance to the Batman Arkham series with Batman Arkham Asylum is pretty cool. But even if the information was exaggerated in those articles, just playing through this DLC is definitely a lot of fun when you're doing it in moderation. When you're doing it a little too much, the DLC definitely gets old, and it does leave a sour taste in your mouth for quite a long duration if you play through it a little too long. But that's why you always return to these games and these DLCs with a fresh mindset rather than just over-abusing it. And, you know, a lot of people don't recognize the importance of this, and that's what you get with burned out gamers. And I've already mentioned a couple of burned out gamers, but I'm not going to mention them again. But just to sum things up, I had a lot of fun with this DLC, and I still replay this DLC every now and then when I want to. And I especially like the chemistry between Batgirl and Robin, because, you know, I've always said that Tim Drake in the Batman Arkham series always gets the short end of the stick, and every time he tries to be like jovial about something, someone always has to shut him down. And for the most part, Tim is very like boring as a character, because even when he is trying to tell jokes, it comes across as very awkward compared to what it's like with Robin or with Jason Todd when he's actually being the Red Hood. But for Tim to actually get some amount of jovialness into his personality, and it's expressed in this DLC that takes place before the events of Batman Arkham Asylum, is great. And then also with the same case with Batgirl as well. You can definitely sense a chemistry between the two and why they work out really well in these days before Batgirl eventually became Oracle due to Joker shooting her in the spine. And interesting how in the ending of this DLC, Joker mentions that the next bullet is for her, and he definitely stayed true to his word, because he then goes to Batgirl's apartment and shoots her. And that's that whole scene that we see in Batman Arkham Knight when Batman is hallucinating that whole entire scene thanks to the Joker's influence, which again doesn't make any sense, but at least they tried to link this game to Batman Arkham Knight via that scene. So yeah, in terms of actually providing some kind of linkage between this DLC and the other games with Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham Knight, this DLC definitely does a better job than the other DLCs, and that's pretty cool. But we have just done that big combat encounter, which is honestly the hardest part of this DLC. Also, this DLC is buggy. I forgot to mention that. There are moments where, during that big combat encounter, enemies just don't try to jump down to you whenever you're first initiating the combat encounter. When you're restarting the checkpoint, you will not get this issue. And then also, I've gotten moments in this DLC where Robin has been stuck inside of a wall. And I've also had other problems with the game's mechanics, and I've also had some other scripting issues as well, but they just happen sporadically. And weirdly, when I started recording this DLC, I never had any of these issues happen, which again is a great example of the moments where you start to record a game and things just play out very differently. So normally when I'm not recording this DLC, I get these bugs, but this time when I'm actually recording it, I don't get the bugs to actually showcase these issues. I don't know why this always happens every single time I'm recording a game. Like what is this? Like, is PlayStation's recording software somehow creating new effects in the game? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But whatever. At least I'm able to deliver on this walkthrough. And we have just done that other encounter right there. I gotta say, I do like the way Joker tries to be very direct in how he approaches combating the heroes. Like, at the end of this DLC, we get into a showdown with him where he and Harley Quinn are actually attacking you directly alongside a bunch of thugs. And he did it as part of his amusement, because, of course, like, you sit down and enjoy the show, and that's what we were getting. And I gotta give credit to Joker for at least having the balls to take on the heroes, to deliver a pretty interesting boss fight. You know, it's just very satisfying beating on the Joker and actually seeing him not be such a coward, and he just tries to hide behind his crooks. and just let them deal with Batman and his other friends. But he's actually being direct here, which is cool. Because he thought he could actually take on the sidekicks, but he actually couldn't. But I guess, because he has his sidekick, Harley Quinn, it only had to be a fair fight, right? Him and Harley Quinn versus Batgirl and Robin. Yeah, really nice that we had that kind of brawl. Imagine if that was the case with the Arkham Knight's boss fight. I'm sure people were probably thinking that when they were looking at Joker's boss fight for the Matter of Family DLC, and they were like, if Joker is gonna actually give you a fight, why couldn't the Arkham Knight give us a fight rather than just being a tank battle that is then reused in Deathstroke's boss fight? That's definitely a thought that was occurring. But now we have this encounter right here, which is a simple Predator encounter. And you can do double takedowns in this game, unlike in the main game of Batman Arkham Knight, where instead you have the Fear takedown. And I don't know why Batgirl doesn't have the ability to do the Fear takedown. I mean, she's just as fast as Robin or Nightwing, and they can do the Fear takedown. I mean, I know there aren't any Predator encounters in this DLC that really warrant the use of the Fear takedown, but maybe if she had the ability to do the Fear takedown, there would have been a lot more Predator encounters. And instead, her substitute is just to use the remote hacking device to distract enemies, and then just do a series of triangle takedowns, but it's just very slow compared to the Fear takedown. And I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of how limited her moveset is. Again, she only has the Batarang, Explosive Gel, and the Back Claw to work with. She doesn't have any of the other abilities that Batman has, like, for instance, being able to do the Seek and Destroy technique, or the multi-ground takedown. Like, it's disappointing that she could be this fast of a character, yet not have any of these abilities that balance out the combat. Because the big combat encounter that we did where we had to save those police officers from drowning? One enemy type that is annoying is the bladed guy, the guys that have the knives. Because the amount of times I'm doing a critical beatdown and a guy with a knife sneaks up right behind me and I end up just holding triangle but then not actually moving the left analog stick back. And I'm having to keep the left analog stick forward in order to actually initiate the beatdown on the guy I'm doing it on. And the guy sneaks up right behind me and I'm not holding the left analog stick back, so he therefore gets a cheap hit on me. Like, that would be a better encounter if you had the ability to just destroy that stupid knife. And I don't like the bladed enemies at all in the games, because I've already mentioned many times in Batman Arkham City that the blade dodge has more priority than any other takedown animation that involves the use of triangle. So the amount of times you try to do a takedown animation in Batman Arkham City, and a guy just happens to be swinging at you with his blade, and you accidentally go into the blade dodge animation, but you don't have the reaction time necessary to comprehend that you entered the animation, and so the next two hits just damage you because you don't have your left analog stick back, or you're not holding triangle. It's so obnoxious. And I just wish you had the ability to just hold triangle. I don't like how you have to pull back on the left analog stick when the left analog stick is essential for actually doing a lot of the fundamental techniques and abilities that are actually crucial to the actual flow of the combat system. Like, that would be a better system overall, and you can actually do it for the first hit. Because I tested it out on the Blade guy in the DLC, and I held triangle, and I dodged the first hit, but I was not able to dodge the other two hits. So they have the capabilities of making this a system, but they don't let you dodge the other two hits by just simply holding triangle. And if they gave you the ability to do that, then I wouldn't be getting all the moments where I'm trying to attack a guy, but when the blade guy gets behind me, and I'm having to keep the left analog stick forward in order to prioritize the guy I'm actually prioritizing, and then the blade guy sneaks up on me, and I mess up because of that. That wouldn't be an issue anymore if they just made it where you can just hold triangle, but that remains to be seen. But we have this Predator encounter right here, which I'm just going to be using silent takedowns on the vast majority of these guys. And then that Kraken in the middle of the arena, I'm going to use it to lure enemies onto the platform and then knock them out with the knockout gas. And I like this conversation that plays here, where these guys are talking about Amber and Krakens, and they're relaying incorrect facts, and then the police officer is just like, you guys are idiots, and then he tries to correct them, and then they act like they're the smart ones. It's a pretty funny conversation. And the Arkham games love to do that, where they like to portray their thugs as just being idiots. And the Batman animated series did the same thing as well, where they make their thugs seem like they're lightheaded, or they're very dense and they have hollow heads, and they talk very weirdly as well. All to show that you have to stay in school, kids, otherwise you'll end up like these mooks. That's too funny. I feel like the conversations you hear between enemies can be more intriguing than the actual main story of the Arkham games. Because there's nothing more enjoyable than just stumbling upon a conversation and they're actually talking about something interesting related to the story or related to something else. And that's the charm of these enemies. And very rarely do games ever deliver proper character development with their enemies. But the fact that these enemies don't feel like AI and they actually feel like actual people in this world and they're going on these conversations is one of the main charms of the Arkham games. And it's something that the Assassin's Creed does well with the old games, where you enter combat or you're running away from enemies and they're just saying all these quotes that just give them a level of character to them. And it's pretty cool. But we skipped on ahead to this part right over here, which is just before the boss fight against Joker and Harley. I've trimmed out a lot of the traversal from this DLC just to make it easier for myself, and plus you have a waypoint to tell you where to go. But the boss fight against Joker and Harley is fun. I mean, I did fail it a couple of times, but the game is going to give you a couple of mechanics for this boss fight. So there'll be moments where Joker or Harley will attack you, and the game will prompt you to press L2 to actually stop their attacks. If you fail to stop Joker's attack, what he will do is he will stun you, but it won't do any damage to you, but Harley will try to attack you, which is when you gotta press L2 in order to summon your partner to actually stop Harley from attacking you, which is really good design. When Harley is doing her attack, Harley is the most dangerous one. She's way more dangerous than Joker because she can attack very fast when she's near you, and she has that red counter indicator above her. So you want to prioritize Harley. And also, do not do critical beatdowns against Joker. Joker, for whatever reason, is resilient to critical beatdowns. Or rather, you can't do the full beatdown animation on Joker. You can only do it against Harley, where the character will actually do the final animation in that beatdown animation. Whereas, if you do it against Joker, they'll just continue to beat down on Joker until eventually you'll get pulled into a cammed animation where Joker counters you, and then you have to press square a bunch of times, and then when he recovers from the animation, you gotta press L1 to stop him from attacking you, similar to what's happening right here. So that right there, I failed to stop the Joker's attack because I did not even know he was attacking, or rather, I just pressed the wrong button, and it didn't do any damage to me, but I had to press L1, otherwise Harley would have damaged me. And Harley is down very quickly, and the same technique of looping critical beatdowns on Black Mask also works against Harley. So when you finish your takedown animation against Harley, you can pick her up off the ground because the game classes her as being in a knockdown status. So because she's in a knockdown status, I'm able to do the critical beatdown and just loop her. That is a very effective way of getting rid of Harley. But the one problem I have with this fight is the camera. The camera is way too close to the character. The combat in the Batman Arkham games only works when you have a really good field of view to actually see who's coming after you and which threats to actually prioritize. But when the camera is this close to the character, it is so hard to tell if there are enemies behind you. And you need to know if enemies are behind you or not, because at times they might do unfavorable attack animations or they might have weapons that'll throw you off. And I don't like that about this game. I mean, I feel like this is something that only Batman Arkham Origins does, because there was never any moment in Rocksteady's games where the camera was placed so close to your character. It was only in Batman Arkham Origins in the casino area of the final offer, and also in this DLC, where the camera is so close to your character, so it makes it very hard to actually see which threats you need to prioritize. And I don't know why Warner Brothers thinks this is a good idea, because as much as it's cool for cinematic purposes, it gets in the way of gameplay, and that's my main problem with this fight right here. But just keep jumping and then doing your attacks, and this should be the final blow against Joker. So this is the end of this DLC. Stay tuned for the final shit DLC of Batman Arkham Knight with Catwoman's Revenge. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.